This is Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, a podcast presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan.
I've been driving, baby, driving up and down this Michigan road.
And now, here he is, your host, Jim Ervin.
Baby, I'm home.
Well, hi there, everyone. I'm Jim Ervin, and this is Time Signatures. This is one of the busiest times of the year for new album releases. And as always, Time Signatures with Jim Ervin is pleased to welcome artists when they release new albums. Today's guest has his fingers in a lot of different pies over the last couple of years, ranging from his own releases to collaborative efforts with Mike Zito, a la the Blood Brothers, and even touring with cult hero Bill Murray. One could say it's never a dull moment for this guy. So let's get him in here because this promises to be a fun discussion. Gulf Coast Records artist Albert Castiglia, welcome to Time Signatures. How you doing, sir?
Good, Irv. How are you?
I'm doing well. So part of what we do here is basically just collect great stories, Albert. And I'm really looking forward to hearing some of yours because you got some fun stuff going on, to be sure. And I suppose the best place to start is back at the beginning. So what are your earliest memories of music?
My uncle lived at my grandmother's house back in the early 80s. And he used to bring his friend would come over. They both played instruments. And they'd come over and his friend would play drums and my uncle would play guitar. And it was kind of like Black Keys before Black Keys, but they weren't as good as the Black Keys. But for a 12-year-old, I was fascinated by what the sounds and what they were doing. And that's kind of what piqued my interest. And my uncle taught me a few chords. And then he moved out of my grandmother's house. He moved out of town and I kind of learned everything else myself. He told me he called me from where he was living and said that there was a Bob Dylan songbook in his drawer in the bedroom at my grandmother's house that had chord charts in the back, and just to grab that and learn. Then that's how I learned first position chords, was from this chord book. It wasn't a chord book, it was like a Bob Dylan fake book.
Okay.
That had chords on the back, and that's when I started. I pretty much learned everything by myself.
Very cool.
Everything I know, from observing other people. But that was the beginning.
Now, I would assume that having a Cuban mother and an Italian father, the musical mix you were exposed to had to have been incredibly diverse, yes?
Well, my parents weren't musical, but they did like what they liked. No, my grandmother played the accordion, my dad's mom. But I think that's as deep as the music pool went with my family. I think I had a great uncle that used to play jazz guitar in Connecticut, but my parents weren't they weren't into the music like I was. But they did, my dad grew up in New York. He grew up in the Bronx. So he was in the 50s and 60s, and he was naturally a fan of doo-wop and classic, early 60s music.
Nice.
He never really got into the psychedelic scene. He was a little old for that. And my mom, she liked country music, which was odd. A Cuban woman who liked country music.
Yeah.
But they didn't have but they weren't like audiophiles or they didn't have big serious record collections. And really I got the bug was my uncle. My uncle was the one that opened the door for me. He had a wonderful record collection.
Nice.
Of stuff. He had all the stuff that wound up permeating into my styles, like Zeppelin and Grand Funk Railroad and Hendrix, and he was. In fact, I think the first song I ever learned on guitar was "Hey Joe."
Okay.
It might have been either "Hey Joe" or "Heartbreaker" by Grand Funk, but the music side, it was really my uncle that opened the one that opened the door, and my mother's side, my mother's brother, actually.
Well, how about your baptism into the blues? Where did that begin for you?
Well, so I as any middle class white kid who plays guitar gets, it always starts with the classic rock artists.
Sure.
It always starts with Clapton and Hendrix and Jimmy Page. And but there was an album that Eric Clapton put out in the early 80s. It was a live album called Just One Night. And it was a double live album recorded at the Budokan in Japan. And about a third, maybe a third or almost half of the material on that album was blues oriented. The first song on the album is Tulsa Time. And right after Tulsa Time ends, they bust right into Early in the Morning. There's an old Junior Wells song. And then there was other songs. There was Early in the Morning. There was what was it? There was Further On Up the Road by Bobby Bland.
Yep.
There was what was the other one? Maceo Merriweather, Worried Life Blues. There was Otis Rush, Double Trouble. It was, and that's where I first got into it. I mean, how else does a middle class white kid from Miami get into blues? But it's through the rock guys,
right?
And so I became fascinated with this, what he was doing, what Clapton was doing. But I wanted to delve into the deeper stuff. But it was a slow dipping of the feet into the waters, because right after that I bought John Mayall's Blues Breaker album, the Beano album.
Oh man,
with Clapton. And then I got a BB King. I remember picking up a BB King, Best of BB King MCA compilation that I absolutely loved. It had How Blue Can You Get, Sweet 16, Hummingbird, Thrill Is Gone, Ghetto Woman. It's a great compilation. And so then I really started going that rabbit hole. But then I was about 14 or 15. I went to a music store in Coral Gables, Florida. Ella, sit down. I got a dog that's harassing me. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I was about 15. I went to a music store in Coral Gables, Florida, called Sounds of Music. And I set out to look for a Muddy Waters album. And the only one they had was on cassette. And it was Hard Again. The Hard Again album that was produced by Johnny Winter. And featured this wonderful band that at the time I didn't know who it was, because it didn't have, sometimes the cassettes back in the day were hit and miss. You either had liner notes in them or you didn't, or they were just blank. Right. And I was always under the assumption that it was, I got most of them right. It was James Cotton on harmonica, Willie Big Eye Smith on drums, Pine Top Perkins on keyboards. And then I'd always assumed that it was Calvin Fuzz Jones on bass, but it was Charles Calmes from James Cotton's band that was playing bass. So where was I?
You're talking about the band.
Yeah. And then I took that tape home, took that cassette home, and I popped it in the machine. The first thing you hear is Muddy's booming voice a cappella on a Manish Boy. Whoa, yeah. And I crapped my pants and hid under the bed when I heard that. It was so scary. It's haunting. You got to remember, this was the 80s. Yeah. And aside from a handful of artists, there wasn't a lot of great stuff of substance being put out, I felt. Now, there were exceptions. I think Springsteen was the most real of them all. But I love the hard rock stuff, the raw energy of AC/DC. I liked Van Halen and the theatrics. There was, there were exceptions. But I never, to somebody who'd been exposed to that, the 80s pop and rock scene and classic rock, to me, this was a revelation to hear this. And then the band busts in right after he's done doing his a cappella intro. And then the band comes in. And that was the most freshest thing I'd ever heard in my life. And this album at the time, was about 15 years old. Not 10 years old. The album was 10 years old. I think it came out in 79. Okay. It was about, and I bought the album in 84, 85. So it was about 5 years old, but I never heard anything like it in my life. it was a revelation, and that was the moment that solidified my path. I think that's when I decided, okay, I'm not going to pan out as a baseball player, and my high school days in baseball are probably not going to happen. Around the time this happened, I tried out for the baseball team in high school. I didn't make the team, but and if it hadn't been for the music, that would have really bothered me because I love sports as much as I love music. Maybe not as much as music, but I'm a tremendous sports fanatic, and I wanted when I was a kid, I wanted to play first base for the Yankees,
Okay.
and then music came along, and then it was more. I found it to be more of a realistic dream, and I couldn't. I was once I heard that Muddy Waters album, I knew what I wanted to do for a living.
Right
It was
on.
set. So yeah, that was the moment.
Now, as I read in a recent interview, you did not go straight away into music following high school, did you?
Nope. Upon request of my parents, I went to college,
Hmm.
and my parents were kind of skeptical about the music thing, and they're like, "Well, you want to play on the side, that's fine, but you need to think about having a career, and you need to go to school." So I went to college. I went to community college for a couple of years, and I went and transferred to the University of Central Florida and got a liberal arts degree. And when I was living in Orlando, I was splitting every other weekend. I'd go down and play with my band. My first band that I played with. I had a band while I was going to college, community college in Miami that I hooked up with. They're all guys 15 years older than me. Had a wealth of I learned so much from them musically, but they all worked for county government. They were all commissioners' aides. They were Iowa guys that moved to Florida to get into politics, but they
Oh,
loved
wow.
music, and I learned so much from that band. And it was great because I lived 3 hours from Miami. When I was going to college, Orlando was only 3.5 hours from where I lived. So every other weekend, I would just drive down to Miami and play with my band, make a few bucks, and bring it back to school and buy beer and,
I was,
and, and
I
things.
thought you were going to tell me you bought albums and stuff.
Oh, that too. That too. I bought, yeah. Um, well, I'll have another story to tell you later on, but I
Okay.
bought that because I discovered a lot of blues at Peaches Records and Tapes in Orlando. Bought a lot of blues albums there while I was going to school. But yeah, so I went to college and played every other weekend in Miami, and then I got a job working for the state of Florida welfare office right out of college because at the time Hurricane Andrew had wiped out half of Miami-Dade County. The southern
Oh,
portion of
wow.
Dade County was absolutely leveled, and there was a dire need for caseworkers, and so they were picking everybody up out of college. They snatched me up. I worked at my uncle's flower shop for a month, and then the state of Florida snatched me as a caseworker. So I worked in the economic services division. I was a welfare worker, and and it wasn't for me. But my father had instilled this thing. I said, you got to, this work ethic in me. I said, you got to keep working. You just got to work, whether you like the job or not. You got to work.
Right.
So it's the old school thing. It wasn't about find something you love and do that. And it's like, no, you got to work. You got to pay the bills. You got to do this shit. They were just, my dad's a lot more progressive thinking now than he was back when he was younger. That whole term about I was so much older then, I'm younger than that now, by Dylan makes so much sense.
Yeah.
You're a little more easygoing, but back when he was in his 30s and 40s and he was raising me, it was you gotta get a job, and you gotta stay working, and it doesn't matter whether you hate the job. And it was not appealing to me. What appealed to me in the beginning was to try to save the world. I felt, oh, okay, I'm going to play music, and I'm going to be this caseworker, and I'm going to help people, and till something big comes along with the music thing. I was very idealistic going into the job,
Right.
but it was government work, and sometimes government work can be very uh,
Mundane.
Well, you're tied down by bureaucracy.
I
And
work
you
for the
thought you were
state
going
of
to help
Michigan. I
people.
understand.
Well, um, it just got to, and back in the 90s, it was the welfare system was kind of weird in
Yeah.
Florida back then. And so I went in there idealistic and went in, and then and over time I grew unhappy with what I was doing, and the urge to keep playing music uh kept burning inside me. So I would play nights, no matter when there was a jam session, I would go. If there was a gig, I would take it, whatever gigs I could take, as many as I could, and didn't care. And then I'd go to work the next day, and that was a grind. And then then in 1996, December 31st, 1996, I went to see Junior Wells at a club in Delray Beach, Florida called the Back Room. And we had a mutual friend named Gloria Pierce. She was good friends with Junior in Chicago. She lived in Florida, and she invited me to go see him. And she said, "Bring your guitar just in case." I said, "All right, but don't bug him. I don't want to." We kept it in the car, and she introduced me to Junior, and talked to his road manager, Michael Blakemore. And about a half hour into the evening, while Junior was playing, his road manager came up to me and he said, "Hey, you I heard you play guitar." I said, "Yeah, I play a little bit." And he's like, "You want to sit in with Junior on the second set?" I said, "I'd love to." And then he goes, "Okay, well, you better be good, because if you're not, he's going to embarrass you in front of all these people." And there's about 300 people in the room. It was a sold out New Year's
Oh,
Eve show.
wow.
And I was like, and I just looked at him and I said, "Man, I work at the welfare office, man. I had knives pulled out on me and tires slashed and had shit said about my mom." And I said, a bad night with Junior Wells beats a good day at the office. I mean, let's go. Let's do this."
There
And I
you
was all
go.
psyched. And I was ready. So they arranged it where I would play with the band without Junior first, because they usually opened up the set for Junior. We would open, and so I did a few instrumentals with the band. Uh, I did, I did Pick Up the Pieces by Average White Band, and I think we did Mr. Magic or Chameleon. I can't remember. It was a couple of instrumentals, and then Junior came up and we did three more songs. I think one of them was Messing with the Kid, and I think we did Little Red Rooster and some funky stuff. I think he was trying to suss me out to see what I knew. So he kind of threw a slow blues, one of his standards, classic hits, and then like a funky number, because he was in a very funky period in his career. He was doing a lot of funky stuff, and so he was. I think he was sussing me out, but at the time I didn't pick up on it, and it was the best. It was the best time. We finished and we hung out, and I drank from his flask, and I had the best time with the band. And then that was, I thought, was as good as it was ever going to get for me. And I went home. I went back to work, and carried on with my life. And then about a month later, I got a call from his road manager again. He said, "Hey, can you fill in for this guy? Fill in for our guitar player for 3 days?" And I said, "Sure," because he had two guitar players. And I filled in for one of the guys, and I did Buffalo, Cleveland, and Detroit. I did the Calumet City Cafe in Buffalo, which is no longer around. I did Wilbert's in Cleveland, and then I did the Magic Bag in Ferndale,
Oh, no
Michigan.
kidding. Yeah.
Did that, and that was the most amazing time of my life. I thought wouldn't get any better than that. And I went back to work, and I got really cocky when I got back to work, and I was like, "Man, I don't need this damn job. I played with Junior Wells. I'm gonna start getting some gigs and tell everybody I played with Junior Wells, and I'll get a bunch of gigs." And about a month into nobody cared that I played with Junior for 3 gigs. And so I went back to work and just carried on with my life. And then I got a call in about April of 97 uh, from Michael Blakemore, Junior's road manager. And he said, hey, can you be in Chicago in 3 days? And I go, for what? He said, to play with Junior full time. I said, okay, yeah, I'll be there. I often joke that I made him wait a minute. I said, well, let me think about it because the state of Florida had such a wonderful benefits program and a benefits package. The decision is going to be that easy. No, it was very easy. I didn't know where I was going to live. I was 27 years old and I didn't give a shit. I just wanted to make this happen. So I
let,
say,
let
I'll
me
be there.
let me interrupt you for 1 minute because you're just glossing right over this, and I
I sure
gotta
am.
hear from the young guy in you when you got the call to be the full-time guitar player for him. Now, keep in mind this is a gig that was previously held by Phil Guy, Lefty Diz, Byther Smith, and John Primer, just to name a few, all of them legends. How did that phone call hit you, man? I mean, seriously, did it blow
I
you away?
It did. I was shocked. Um, let's not forget Byther Smith, uh, Sammy Lawhorn, Buddy Guy, all these people that played with it was and me and John Primer hit around. I ran into him. Kenny Neal was in Junior's band as well.
No
Uh,
kidding.
some people don't know this,
Wow.
but Kenny was in his band for a period of time. He played bass in his band. So when we got together at the Blues Music Awards this last time, I tried to round up everybody that I knew that played with Junior. I said, Junior Wells was a Junior Wells alumni club. We need to take a picture.
Love it.
And I
I
got a
love it.
picture of me and Johnny Iguana from the Claudettes who played piano
Yeah.
and Primer and somebody else I can't remember. So I tried to round up and I got us to take the picture. It was like herding cats, but I never found the picture. But yeah, I thought about that. I thought about the long line of guitar players that play with Junior, and I also thought about the 6 degrees of separation from Muddy Water
Yes, sir.
because Junior was in Muddy's band. So in a way, I was a link. I'm a link to that past.
Yes, you are.
It's like I'm a generation removed from that past. I think Junior was Junior was playing with the Aces, and Little Walter was playing with Junior, and they switched harmonica players, and Junior was in Muddy's band. So I mean, I was blown away on so many levels,
Yeah.
and so nervous. I had all kinds of feelings going into it, but trepidation was not one of them. I was not really. There was nothing to think about. I made that decision in 2 seconds after the
What, what
shock.
about what
I
about your
said yes.
parents, man? Did they approve?
Yeah. Well, they finally understood that I was serious about it. They
That's
never
cool.
told they never told me not to play music or pursue it. But they were like cautiously optimistic or maybe skeptical, but they let me find my way, and they helped me out when I needed it. Times were tough in Chicago after Junior died, and they
Sure.
wound up helping me. Um, and then when things got rough, they would tell me, "Hey, maybe you think you should ought to go back to the welfare office." I said, "No, I'm going to stick with." They throw their 2 cents in, but they didn't hinder me at all in my dream, and they started to understand that this was not a hobby, and so it was. I had 3 days to be in Chicago, and I didn't know where I was going to live. I called my cousin. My cousin had just got married, and he lived in Chicago. And I called him. I said, "Hey, man, I got the job with Junior." He's, "Oh my God, that's great." Blah blah blah. Um, can I crash in your pad for a couple of days, for maybe a week or two, till I find a place? And he's like, "Oh, okay." And and then so he picked me up at the airport, and I went to his house, and that lasted one day. because I had a snoring problem. They lived in a loft.
Oh,
And if you've been to a loft, if you know lofts, the walls don't go all the way up. They're like cubicles. They're like big cubicles. The walls, they're like the rooms. And apparently my snoring problem was pretty bad.
oh
And his
boy.
wife couldn't get no sleep. And my cousin, I woke up from a slumber, my first slumber in Chicago, and he's standing over the side of the bed, and he's like, "Oh, bro, you got to go." And I was like, "All right, fine, I understand." So I packed my crap and I went up the street to a transient hotel. This He lived off of Lincoln and Belmont on the north
Okay.
side. And I took my bags and I walked up 2 blocks to a transient hotel on Belmont Avenue called the Hotel Belmont. It was a transient hotel. It was like $30 a night. And it was full of pimps and hookers and hobos and bums. And it was something out of the Blues Brothers. It was amazing. And I lived there for a week or two. And I had to share we had one of these rooms. I had these rooms, a room that had to share the toilet with the guy next door,
Oh
some
man.
wino next door. I mean, and I used to hear screaming and yelling down the halls, and sometimes gunfire. And, and, and I remember one time I just looked out the window of the motel, and I just said, "Man, I can't believe this is the greatest day of my life. I'm a blues man living in Chicago. I'm living the dream." Uh, and then a couple of weeks later, I got settled in. I had another cousin who lived there who helped me out, and I got settled in, and the rest is history.
Albert, I want to flip the
I never
page
had a
here.
real job since. I
Oh,
just
yes, you did. Oh, yes, you did.
it's not a job if you love what you do. This is the
Amen,
greatest.
brother.
I vowed that I would never go back. When I was in that hotel, when I was in that transient motel, all I could think about was not going back to the welfare office. I said, I am never going back
Right
to
on.
doing something that I don't love. This is what I'm doing from here on out. There's no turning back.
Now, I want to flip the page here for a minute because I read about a discussion that you had with Junior early on, and I would love to hear what you guys talked about that first evening. And it caused you to be late to the bandstand. So let's have the details.
Oh, you heard? Oh, this story. Well, this story was a very pivotal. It was a very important conversation in my life
Yes, sir.
because because I just joined the band. We're on the Ultimate Blues Cruise, which was the precursor to the legendary Rhythm and Blues Cruise. So the Ultimate Rhythm and Blues Cruise was a big deal. They had it on the SS Norway, and Ronnie Earl was on the bill, Bo Diddley, Irma
Oh,
Thomas,
man.
all my heroes. Sandra Hall, who I wound up playing with, she was on the bill. I wound up being in her band for 3.5 years. Eddie Clearwater. I was overwhelmed by it all. And we had a gig on the main stage, the main room, the main hall, the big theater. We had
Mm-hmm.
2 shows. We did a show, we did a set, and then we had to take a break. And Michael Blakemore, our road manager, had to take care of some business. And he said, Albert, look after Junior. I'm going to go take care of some business. I got to go talk to Roger, or whoever, the promoter, whoever he had to talk to. So Junior and I sat at the bar, and he ordered drinks, and we talked about music and his past. He told me a story about him and Earl Hooker. Him and Buddy Guy were brothers, much like Mike and I. Mike Zito and I are kind of the same way. We're like the carbon copy of the blue of Junior and Buddy. We just kind of, but I think very few people understood what kind of a friendship Junior had with Earl Hooker, and how they grew up together in Chicago, and they were doing all kinds of wild stuff. They would go down to the Deep South and hitch rides and play for white sharecroppers, and then head on back up to Chicago with their money, and they play on trolley cars in Chicago together. the back of trolley cars. It was fascinating hearing these stories. And then he got serious with me a bit, and he said, "Well, what do you want to do with your career?" I said, "Well, I want to play with you for the rest of my life. You got me out of the welfare office. You saved my life." He said, "Well, I appreciate that, but I don't expect you to be in this band for the rest of your life. And but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you some advice now. You need to keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, and your mouth shut, and just absorb everything you can from this experience." And this was a very moving thing for him to say, because he had guys. It was a very big band. It was a 9-piece band.
Wow.
And there were factions in that band. When you get a band that big, there are going to be factions.
Yeah.
And I was the outcast because I was the last guy to join the band before he died. And I didn't know. I had to feel my way through living in Chicago. It was a total different way of living. And I was looked upon by most of the guys in the band. I don't want to say most of them, but some of the guys that have been there for a long time resented me being there because I wasn't a Chicago guy, and Junior picked me, so they assumed that I was going to be like the spy, because there was a little backstabbing going on in that band. There was a little drama going on in that band at the time, and Junior was aware of that. He was a very wise man, though, and he didn't want me to spy on the guys that were undermining him. He didn't want me to report to him whenever they had said shit about him or said stuff about anybody in the band, or they complained. He wanted me to learn from, which I found to be that was a pretty big deal, because human nature would say, "Hey, man, just be careful with that guy, be careful with that guy, and watch him because he'll stab you in the back." No, he didn't do any of that. He just said, "Hey, I want you to learn from everybody in this band." And I did. I learned a lot of what to do and what not to do. I learned a lot about life. I learned a lot about, I learned a lot about the Black experience, because I was one of 3 white guys in a predominantly Black blues band, and I learned a lot about the culture, and I learned so much. And it's because Junior was the bigger man. He passed that to me, and it meant a lot. He said, "Learn from everybody and everyone in this band, and you'll be fine, because one day you're going to have your own band, and you're going to need to keep the blues alive."
Time Signatures is pleased to welcome an endorsement from Bushman Harmonicas. Bushman Harmonicas was founded in 1996 by John Hall, and they are quickly becoming the premier harmonica manufacturer in the world, featuring the Nittlinger, a harp producing rich, full chord sound. It's like having an accordion in your mouth. Loud and lively, easier to play than any double reed harmonica ever made. For a look at everything Bushman has to offer, please visit bushmanmusic.com, and by all means, let them know that Time Signatures sent you.
And I, ever since then, I've been keeping my mouth shut about most things. When it comes to band things, I find that listening is the best thing. You just listen and evaluate, and then make your decision on what you're going to do in life. And I learned that from him. So it was time for us we look at the clock. After he told me this moving thing, I look at the clock. I said, "Man, we got to get back to the theater, man. We got to go." All right, let's go. And we're walking back, and there's the casino is between the bar and the theater. And Junior had the magnetism and the aura of an Ethiopian prince.
Okay.
He had he had a beautiful suit. He always dressed impeccably. He had the hat, he had the chains, and the charisma, and every you walk by, everybody would just turn. And so all these women playing the one-armed bandits at the casino, and they see him walking, and they're just in awe of him. And we're walking. He kept stopping to talk to these women. And he's like, "Hey, baby, hey, what you?" And he'd be flirting with the girls and stuff. And he kept stopping. And it was like, "Man, Junior, we got to come on, we got to go." All right, all right. And he kept talking. And one time, and then he went up to one girl and he goes, "Hey, mama, you see Junior Wells and a bulldog in a fight. Who are you going to help?" And sometimes the woman would say, "I'm going to help the bulldog. He's in trouble." Or they would say, "Oh, I'll help you, Junior. I love you." And he had a good answer. He had always had a good answer for him. And it was funny. It was great to see, but we were late. And Junior's manager, Marty Salzman, came up and he goes, "Hey, Albert, what the F is going on here? He's supposed to be on stage." I said, "Man, what am I supposed to do? I can't tell the man what to do. He's Junior Wells. I can't just tell him what to do." All right. And then Junior's like, "All right, let's go." And then we get to outside the theater and I hear applause. And I look at Junior, I go, "What's that?" And I open the door and everybody's on stage but me.
Oh, man.
So, and they start playing. So I ran up the aisle and grabbed my guitar, and the band's giving side eyeing me. And I'm like, "Don't look at me. You don't know what's going on. You don't know me. Just don't worry about it." And we kept playing. So many months later, it might have been way after Junior died, my old roommate, Willie Samuels, was the bass player. He and I were talking. He goes, "Remember that time we were on the cruise and you were late for that gig?" And I said, "I wasn't late for the gig. I was taking care of Junior." I know. But you remember that?" I said, "Yeah, I remember that." He said, "Well, you got fined for that, you know? They fined you $50 for that, for being late." So what are you talking about? What are you talking about? My money didn't change. Apparently what happened was they had a meeting afterwards and the whole band wanted me fined because if anybody got fined in the band, they put the money in the kitty, and the kitty was like a fund to get everybody the beautiful Junior Wells band satin jackets. And so the money went in the kitty, and when they had enough money in the kitty, everybody was going to get these jackets. So me being late was going to put everybody one step closer to getting these jackets. So they were all clamoring for me to get fined. "Well, that ain't right, Junior. You need to be fined." And apparently what happened was Junior paid the fine. He said, "I'm the reason he was late. I'll pay the fine. But don't tell him that I did that." So he never wanted me to know. And that just
Wow.
shows what kind of a man he was. He was really a fair man. He could be a tough cookie.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that he was tough on me. My was tough on me, so I could handle it. But he could be very, very uh, he could be very tough. But he was also a very caring man, and he had empathy, and that I loved him. I loved him very much. He was a great guy.
Yes, sir. Um, we could talk about your history for hours, I promise you. But I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because
Whatever you want to do.
I need to talk and spend a moment discussing your relationship with Mike Zito, who you just referenced a few minutes ago. How did you two meet, and how did the Blood Brothers come together?
I met Mike almost 20 years ago at a club in Florida at the back room in Boca. They moved to Boca Raton, the same club that I played with Junior at for the first time. They moved to a different location,
Okay.
and I saw him play at Boca Raton for the first time. A mutual friend of ours, Monty Lortz, who was a promoter out of Missouri, would always tell me about Mike, and I kept hearing about Mike. And Mike, he goes, "Oh, I like you guys are my favorites," and he kept telling me about Mike. And been hearing about Mike for years, and he finally was playing in my hometown or outside of my hometown in Boca Raton, and my wife and I went to go see him. And I guess the first time, and when we walked in, he was playing Little Red Corvette. He's got a version of Little Red Corvette, I believe, from his first album. And it was like, wow, it was a great show. And then I walked up and talked to him, and we chatted for a while, and and we kept in touch. And then we did festivals together, and we did shows together in Florida, and we just kept in touch over the years. And then he'd been looking after me ever since. We're very, our styles are different, guitar wise, but we grew up in the same period. He's only like a year and a half younger than I am, so he grew up listening to a lot of the same stuff. We're both big Van Halen fans growing up. Um, Classic rock and hard rock and heavy metal. I mean, you can't help growing up in the '80s, and that's, if you're a guitar player, that's what you listen to. That's what they were playing.
Yes, sir.
And so we had a lot of that in common, although our styles are very different. Uh, he's more technically proficient than I am, and I'm probably more visceral player. But in terms of, we just hit it off, and he was always looking out for me, and so he'd come to town, I go visit him, and I'd sit in, or I'd go be in the Midwest where he be, and we'd sit in, and this happened for years and years. And then he got me the deal with Roof Records in 2014.
Okay.
I was getting ready to sign with another label, and then Mike called me from Royal Albert Hall. He was with the Royal Southern Brotherhood.
Wow.
And he called me, and I go, "Where are you at?" He goes, we're at Royal Albert Hall playing a blues festival, and Thomas Roof wants to sign you. I said, "Really?"
Damn.
And he was looking for somebody. What happened was Thomas was having trouble finding a third person to fill up the Blues Caravan tour for that year. And I think he went through everybody. And I was like the last one they come with. And Mike's like, he really wants to sign. It's a great deal. He's a good guy. So I looked at the contract, and it was good. It was kosher. And I got my deal with Roof because of Mike. And then I had done an independent release. So my first release with Roof was an independent, an album that I had already recorded.
Okay.
And then after that, Mike produced the next two albums for Roof with me. He produced the Big Dog album and the Up All Night album. And then I wouldn't say we had a falling out with Roof, but we had a disagreement about the next album, which was one of the most important albums in my life. It was called Masterpiece. And it was inspired by my daughter finding me 8 years ago. She found me 8 years ago, found out I had a daughter that I didn't know, and two grandchildren.
Wow.
And so Mike was the first person I talked to when it happened. Samantha Fish was the second. I remember calling Samantha Fish. I said, "When were you born?" I go, "1989. Why?" "Same year my daughter was born." What? And but yeah, Mike was the first one I called, and he's like, "Man, that's great." And then I started writing. When that happened, the lyrics, the inspiration, everything just started to click. I just started to write. I wrote about everything, and it was the same time that we were having these shootings down in Florida.
Sure.
And the Parkland shooting in Fort Lauderdale happened, and then a few months later, there was a shooting at a synagogue in Pittsburgh that same year in 2018. And I went from not having any kids to all of a sudden thinking about what kind of world are we going to leave for my kid and my grandkids. My whole life changed. My whole way of looking at life changed. And it came, and out of it came, there's some great lyrics. And so I sent some roughs to Mike, and Mike said, "This is great stuff. I have an idea. I have a concept for this album. You and I are going to do all the instruments." And I said, "Did you fall off the wagon?" And he's like, "No, just hear me out. Just hear me out." And okay. And he modeled this idea after a Shelby Lynne album. Shelby Lynne was this remarkable country singer
Mm-hmm.
who decided she didn't want to be a pop princess, and she went in the studio and took the same approach where it was just her and her producer and maybe a guitar player, and they did all the instruments. I think it was the I Am Shelby Lynne album, and
Okay.
that inspired Mike production wise to take this approach. So we went in there and I played guitar and maybe bass on 2 tracks, and then Mike played guitar. He played drums and bass. He played drums and bass on most of the tracks, and we put this album out. And everybody that I played it for that I knew wasn't going to lie to me loved it. Everybody loved it except Roof. Thomas Roof did not like the record, and that was the most important person that you needed to like because it's his
Sure.
label. But he was like, this is terrible. The drums sound like this sounds like a high school kid's playing drums. And Mike's like, well, I'm the one playing drums. Well, this is terrible. And the recording is it was raw. And they wanted a raw record, but it was too raw for them. So they wanted me to make some changes. And I wasn't ready to compromise. Normally, compromise is a good thing, but in this case, I did not want to compromise any of this. I love the album the way it was. I wanted it that way. I liked the way it was. It came out great. It came from my heart. The album was as raw as my feelings were, and so there was no way I was willing to compromise. And so we were at a stalemate. I was at a stalemate with the label, and I was in California on tour, and Mike called me and he said, hey, I just started this label. My intention was to sign my friends from St. Louis who were lesser known artists. I really wasn't planning on signing an established artist, but I like this album needs to come out. And would you sign with me? I said, yeah, absolutely. Because do you want to know the terms? I said, nah, I trust you. I've been trusted him my whole life, ever since I've known him. He's never screwed me over. He's the only person that I would do a handshake deal with. And so we did it. He bought it. We bought the record out from Roof. It cost me a little bit, but it was worth it. And the album wound up winning. I garnered my first Blues Music Award for Blues Rock Album of the Year.
Man.
And so and then we made albums ever since then. He produced he produced a couple more of my albums, and then COVID happened. No, wait a minute. So yeah, it's funny because the year I won the Blues Music Award was during COVID. So the
Okay.
Blues Music Award was virtual. And so they had, I have to tell this side story because it's funny as hell.
No, it's
Warren
good.
Haynes. Warren Haynes was a presenter for that category, for my category. And he was in his house. I don't know. It looked like he was in a home in Tahiti or Asheville. I don't know. And he's like, "Hi, this is Warren Haynes. We're gonna do this is for this next award is for Blues Rock Album of the Year." And then they go to the off-air announcer and he like lists the nominees.
Right.
Warren wasn't involved at all. So and so, blah 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 blah. And then he said, the winner, Albert Castiglia. And then it goes back to Warren Haynes and he goes, "Congratulations." Boom. He didn't. No, I don't think he even knew who won. I think he was just placed in there. And I think he was wearing a different shirt when he said, "Congratulations." I think
Oh,
this was,
wow.
but I don't know. I don't know for sure. But so yeah, 2020, that's when I won the award. And we were on lockdown. And I had just put out a live album called Wild and Free. Ain't that a bitch? We all went on lockdown and I put out an album called Wild and Free. And that was a great live album, by the way. I really like making that album. I've just played ever since I I signed to that label. It's been nothing but great records with them, and every album has gotten better and better. But then COVID happened. We were on lockdown. I tried to avoid going to work as much as possible. I had some money socked away, and I was living in Florida, so it was semi-open. But they should rename Florida. Sometimes I feel we should rename it. This is why we can't have nice things, because people just screw things up over there.
Yeah.
We got a bunch of weirdos down there. So the end of the year, at the end of 2020, I had to go back to work. So and I was not qualified to do anything else. So I went back and I played. In the beginning of 2021, I got COVID. And I remember where it was too. It was a club, it was at a tiki bar in Fort Myers, Florida. And there was a storm in the Midwest in Texas. And everybody flocked to Florida to get out of this storm. And it was mass hysteria. Everybody's hugging on each other, kissing each other. And boy, like a day or two later, I got so sick.
Oh.
And I went through quarantine, but I had the long COVID symptoms. And I couldn't get out of bed. I was depressed. I was burning up. My neck was burning up. I had pins and needles, my hands and feet. I was a mess. And I was bedridden and I was depressed and I wasn't working that much. And when I did have to go to work, I had such crazy brain fog that I wouldn't even remember. I couldn't remember. I remember playing a song and I couldn't remember playing a part on the song. And I had to ask somebody in the band. I said, "Did I do this intro to Loan Me a Dime? Did I play that intro? I don't remember playing it." That's how messed up I was. Anyway, I got it. The depression hit in, and I wound up getting some medication for the anxiety, and I started to feel a little better. But I was still in bed, and Mike was like, "Hey, man, if Mike had just put out a Chuck Berry tribute album on Roof, and I played on it, and he got an offer to do a handful of dates in the Midwest, 3 dates to be exact, all based on this tribute to Chuck Berry. And he invited me and Joanna Connor to come along on this.
Nice.
And he got me out of bed. And I met him in Omaha. And we did Omaha, Nebraska first and killed it. We played in Kansas City and Knuckleheads and killed it there. And then we had the big show in St. Louis where Chuck Berry was born and raised. And we killed it there. And then word got out about how great this show was. It got the attention of Roger Neighbor at the legendary Rhythm and Blues Cruise. And Walter Trout that year had double booked and couldn't make the cruise. So they asked us to do it. So they asked Mike and I and Joanna to do the gig.
Nice.
And Tito Jackson was involved he was on the bill with us too, because he had signed to Gulf Coast Records. And that show went really well. And I started to feel a little better. And then Mike reached out to me about a week or two after the cruise. And Mike and I's working relationship, is much like Frank Sinatra's and Dean Martin's, in the sense that Mike is Frank Sinatra. He's the one always wheeling and dealing and putting things together. And I'm the guy in the hot tub with the martini, just waiting for him to call and tell me when it's time to go. And that's pretty much what happened. He called me a few weeks after the cruise, and he said, "Hey, man, I talked to Intrepid, our agency at the time. Said, I got an idea. We're going to put both our bands together. We're going to merge the band, and we're going to take this on the road. We're going to call it the Blood Brothers Tour." And I said, "Sounds good. I'm all in, baby." I'm just like Dean Martin. "It's all right, Daddy. I'm ready, Daddy. Oh, let's go." Yeah. And that's what happened. We didn't have any material, so we were just doing covers the first year. And then and then our first album we did with Joe Bonamassa and Josh Smith.
Right.
Been
so
an
you're
amazing.
Doing you're doing
Mike
the Blood
got me out
Brothers
of-
in addition to doing your solo stuff as well, right?
Correct. Correct.
Wow. Go ahead.
Well, it just kept us both. It kept us busy. It was a way to keep our careers going.
Yeah,
It's easy to kill the golden goose. Hey, we you burn out the solo band, and then you got no gigs. So we had a way to keep both bands working, make a little bit of extra money because we made it. When you put both bands together, it's a different show,
sure.
and so we were able to command a little more money, and it sustained us for a while. And we're still doing it. We're tied. We will forever be tied together through the Blood Brothers and through our association with Gulf Coast Records. We are always going to be like this. There's no there's no he's like a brother to me. I
And
wouldn't
then
say
of
friend because he does things to me that a friend would not allow. That only a brother could tolerate.
right.
So we get on each other's nerves a lot, and I pick on him, and he picks on me, and but when it comes right down to like the nitty gritty, when we need each other, we're there for each other. So
Right on.
it's a great
And then of
relationship. It's a
course
great
you
friendship.
got Bill Murray that came into the mix. How did that happen?
Well, the Blood Brothers thing was doing very well,
Yes, sir.
and I got to meet and John Murray, Bill's brother, who we got to meet a few years ago, many years ago, was a fan of Mike and I. Loved the Blood Brothers and loved both of our bands individually. And he just kept telling Bill about us over the years. Man, you got to see these guys. He just kept, and he would tell us, John would go, yeah, man, I'm talking, I'm hyping them up to you, and I said, great, thanks. Appreciate it. And then we got an invitation 2 years ago. We got an invitation to play the after party of the Caddyshack golf tournament that was put on by the Murray brothers. All
Wow.
the Murray brothers put this charity golf tournament on in St. Augustine. And Jimmy Vivino usually runs the jam, runs the night. And so we were invited to play. Blood Brothers were invited to play. And I lived 2.5 hours away, so it was just a drive for me. Everybody else kind of flew. And we worked on some songs with Bill. Bill wanted to play and sing and play some percussion. Worked about 5 songs with him, and it was wonderful. And after the show, uh, John told us, he said, "Man, that's the most fun he had playing music in a long time." And then I guess Mike had a conversation with him and said, "Hey, man, you should join our band." And Bill was like, "Really? You think so?" Don't think about it. And then after that Caddyshack tournament, he started crashing our gigs. He crashed our gig in Vegas. We played the Blues Bender in Vegas,
Wow.
and we and Mike reached out. Mike's the one that's always reaching out to Bill
Sure.
about business stuff. Mike is, like I said, Mike is the business guy. He's the protagonist. The one that's always proactive on these things. So he's the one that's always got Bill's ear when it comes to the business side of things. Bill and I just talk about sports and you know world events and stuff. But he apparently he reached out to Mike. He said, "Oh, I heard you play in Vegas. I'd like to come." And they worked it out with AJ Gross, the promoter, or the guy that puts on the Bender. Got him a place to get him a room and compensated him, and he came and sat it with us, played the whole set with us,
Oh,
and then got
cool.
up and did like a Rolling Stone, which is like our classic ending song. And all these people were just like crying watching him because he's not a classically trained singer, but
Right.
he's got such charisma and he sings with such intent. And he's just so into it that you can't help but get goosebumps. He doesn't have to be Pavarotti. He's just got this charisma, and it was a lot of fun. And then he crashed another gig in Charlotte, North Carolina. A few months later, in November, 2 years ago, he crashed our gig and played the whole set with us at the neighborhood theater. in Charlotte, North Carolina, and that went really well. And then a week after that, Zito calls me and he says, Albert, Bill wants to do some dates with us next year. I said, oh, great, great. No, he wants to do a lot of dates with us. We wound up doing 30 dates with him last year.
Man.
Which was a lot, which was too much. We all admit, but he was so psyched about the band. But we got to go to a lot of great places with him. And because of Bill's celebrity, he took us to Red Rocks. We got to play Red Rocks with him because Bill was good friends with Big Head Todd. And Big Head Todd was playing I think they had a 40th anniversary tour, and they were playing Red Rocks, and they invited us to play, and it went being Big Head Todd, Warren Haynes, and Bill Murray and his Blood Brothers.
Damn.
We got to go there with him. We did the Ryman. We did the Ryman last November. We played a Christmas show on NBC with Trisha Yearwood. We played Dave Chappelle's nightclub in Yellow Springs, Ohio, or Sandy Springs, Ohio. I can't remember what it's called. Amazing, just amazing. And it's still fun as long as we keep changing the songs for him. He wants to, we keep him engaged.
Sure.
We'll ride it as long as we can. I love it. I love playing with him. We took a little bit of crap from people. Like, how could you bring him into your band? You guys are good enough without him. I said, man, he's Bill Murray.
Yeah, but look at the things that have happened because of that. I mean, I get it.
I said, I'm playing Red Rocks. What are you talking about? I'm going to play Red Rocks with him. He's taken us to so many cool places, and we met so many cool people. I got to meet a bunch of Chicago Cubs legends and Bears legends.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a remarkable run with him. He's a good dude. He's a good guy.
Well, so Albert,
we didn't care. It's just been a fun ride. And it's because Mike, Mike is the conduit to all this. Bill was actually a fan of Mike's before. He didn't really know me that well, but he had heard of Mike because Mike's version of Little Red Corvette played at a Charleston River Dogs game, the minor league team that Bill owned. And it was playing on the loudspeaker, and he didn't know. He asked who it was, and the PA announcer said, "That's Mike Zito." So he was familiar with Mike before he was familiar with me. He didn't know much about me, other than
Albert,
what his brother told him.
In the ensuing years, you guys have been really busy, and it appears you're not only celebrating the release of a new album from the Blood Brothers called "Help Yourself," but you're also getting ready to release your own solo project entitled Grits and Glory. Now, I want to give the Blood Brothers a moment here. Talk about that new album with Mike, would you please?
The Help Yourself?
Yes, sir.
We recorded it in St. Louis. It was self-produced. Mike and I produced it, but really it was the whole band was really involved in it. And it was great because I can only write songs about things that affect me in my life. I can't, that's, white blues artists, we often get, there are a few people that, are skeptical of blues rock artists and things like that. And I try to not, the way I maneuver on that is to be as authentic to myself as I can. I cannot write about the Black experience. I cannot write about growing up in the Jim Crow South. I can't write about those things. I can only write about what I'm experiencing. As long as I do that, my conscience is clear because Junior Wells gave me the blessing to keep doing this.
Yes, sir.
And his opinion was the only one that mattered. But I have to write about things in my life, And around this time that we went in the studio, Mike had just turned the corner. He had lost his wife to cancer.
Yes.
And so it was a long torturous episode for him. and his wife in particular, because she died of pancreatic cancer. And if you know anybody that's gotten that, you don't find it until it's too late. Pancreatic cancer is the most evil, insidious. It's one of the most insidious things I've ever even heard of. It gets misdiagnosed as pancreatitis. You keep having these attacks. By the time it's fully revealed that you have it, you're at stage 4, and it's a death sentence. There's no way of detecting it. It's a pain. It's really. So this was Mike went through 4 years of his wife, watching his wife go in and out of hospitals.
Wow.
And being there for her and flying home from, like, we'd do a tour and he'd fly straight home and we'd drive the van back because he had to go be back with his wife. And so she suffered immensely, and he was there for her every step of the way. And she died. Before he died, she had asked him what he was going to do when she was gone, because she had a month left. And he said, well, I'm just going to carry on and just stay single. And she said, well, no, you need to find somebody. You need to find a companion, and you need to find someone that's going to love these kids, and these kids of ours. And so Laura passed away, and then 7 months later, Mike's playing a show, and he runs into a girl he knew from high school, and she had been following his story, and they connected, and she's been great for him. Now when Laura died, he wrote songs that wound up being on his Life is Hard album, and that was all inspired by what he went through with his wife.
Yes, sir.
By the time we got in the studio last year to do Help Yourself, he turned the corner and found himself in a good place, and found a good woman who loves him and loves his kids, which is the most important thing. You got to have, if he loves you, that's fine. But if they don't love your kids, it's never going to work. And he found somebody incredibly patient. Two teenage kids. Mike has these 2 teenage kids who just lost their mother, and he found the perfect mate because she is so good to those kids. And his lyrics and his music was reflective of that. In mine, I was from the total opposite. I was pissed off and bitter about the music business. Some things that happened during that period of time. People who I thought were my friends, people who I trusted with my career, people I had in my bands. I had been betrayed by every facet of the business at the time. So there was a little bit more of a bitterness coming from my end. So we had the bitter and the sweet, and it made for a great album. Mike wrote about finding love. He had a song called Alive, which is really beautiful, a beautiful song. And I wrote a song called You Can't Be a Prophet in Your Hometown.
Yeah.
Which was about no matter what you do when you travel all over the world, and how much of an impact you make all over the world, when you get back home, the clubs and the people down there just want to keep you as a local and don't want to give you your flowers or pay you what you should be getting paid. And they want to treat you like they're like, oh, you're one of us. You can't do that. You can't ask for more money. You're local. I just happen to live here. I tour all over the world. So that's what I was experiencing this. I was experiencing betrayal in my camp from a number of people. And I was bitter. But I have a way of taking that bitterness and channeling it into some really good songs. So it was a great record to make. It was cathartic for me. It was the message that Mike wanted for himself.
Sure.
And it turned out to be a great record, and we won the Blues Music Award for Blues Rock Album of the Year for it. So I'm very proud of that record.
Beautiful. And now, as we turn the page one more time, Grits and Gravy, an interesting juxtaposition between
Grits and Glory.
I'm sorry, Grits and Glory. My Please forgive me.
Oh, you got Waffle House on your mind, don't you? It happens.
I wish they had one up here. But
They
no,
don't?
an interesting juxtaposition between the title and having Big Ben in the background. But there's a strong significance to Big Ben, isn't there?
Is there?
Talk about it. I'm turning
That
it
we
over to you.
recorded. Well, so it was time for me to make an album, and the president of the label, Overton, Ollie Overton, approached me and he said, "Would you like to record an album? Would you like to record an album in the UK?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." And I was just being a wise ass. I said, "Well, why don't we just record it at Abbey Road?" I was being a wise ass. And he goes, "I'll look into it." And then about a week later, he goes, "I've secured 4 dates for you at Abbey Road in November." And I was like, "Geez, I was just kidding."
Wow.
So we were scheduled to record the album last November, but however, the BBC commandeered the studio for that period of time because somebody named McCartney needed the studio. Some guy named McCartney
For
needed to
pity's
use our
sake.
studio. Who does he think he is, a Beatle? It was Studio 3, and they needed it. So when the BBC comes knocking, you're gonna get moved. So we bound up and we graciously moved it to December, and it was it was the most incredible experience musically. I don't know. I mean, I've had so many wonderful experiences, but it's my most recent amazing experience because there was so much to it than just the Abbey Road experience.
Yeah.
The label really, you know, Mike has been very successful for a long time, and he's everything he touches turns to gold. Quite a big shadow for me sometimes. And I think they were really the label saw that it was time. They had to do something to supercharge me in my solo career, something that'll help me stand out, like Mike does. So they felt, this Abbey Road thing would be a great thing. So so they made they put in a lot of money to do this, and the whole excursion began in Birmingham, England, because that's where the label's based out of, in the Midlands. And so me and the band flew to Birmingham to rehearse. And we rehearsed in this rehearsal studio in the middle of this real tough neighborhood in Birmingham. Birmingham's a tough town. It's a industrial town, it's a blue collar town, but it's quite pretty, and they've got they got some remarkable architecture there. But this place in this area reminded me of something out of Peaky Blinders. It was something out of that Peaky Blinders show. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. But we get into this dingy studio, and it turned out that Black Sabbath rehearsed there for their final tour.
Wow.
So we were absorbing this shit, man. We absorbed the hell out of it, and they had a little recording booth there, and they recorded our rehearsals, and it went incredibly well. And then the next day we did a tour of Birmingham, and Ozzy had just died a few weeks prior.
Sure.
So we went over and walked to the Black Sabbath bridge on the river there, and saw the painting, the mural of Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler, Bill Ward, and Ozzy. And then we saw we went and looked all over the landmarks all over Birmingham, and just had a great time. All this was being documented they're doing a documentary on this whole experience.
Really?
They had a camera crew following me around second I got off the plane. So there's going to be a great documentary on this whole thing. So we finish up our trip to Birmingham, and we drive to London. And the day before the recording, I had to do some promotional pictures. So we went to central London, did a photo shoot with Rob Blackham, this wonderful photographer out of London, who's photographed every big rock artists out there, and took us all over Central England, Central London, Soho, those Big Ben shots, London Bridge, Piccadilly Circus. There's this little strip of guitar stores. I forgot the name of it. We went there and looked at some old guitars and took pictures there. And then at the end of the day, we went to Jimi Hendrix's apartment, his flat,
Yeah.
which also which is also the flat that the composer Handel lived in. Handel, and so we went there, and I don't know how the label pulled this off, but they were able to get the museum to allow me to record 3 Jimi Hendrix songs on acoustic in his bedroom.
Wow.
So we set up the camera. They set up a camera, got the audio set up. The producer of the album was doing the audio. I've been playing Hey Joe since I was 12 years old. But when they hit that record button, I sang the third verse first. Second time around, I screwed it up again. And then I screwed it up a third time because I was overwhelmed by the heaviness of the moment. And I said,
can't
wait a
even
minute.
imagine.
You can just stop the camera, please. And I said, can you stop the camera? And I took a deep breath and meditated for a second. And then I rearranged the songs. That would probably loosen things up. And I changed the order of the songs and got through it. And then everybody left. The Kramer crew split. Well, they went outside. Everybody cleared the room. And I said, can I have a minute in the room here? And everybody left. And it was just me and Jimmy's bedroom. And I just started looking around. And I started to feel his presence. And I was getting goosebumps. And tears were welling in my eyes. And I even took a picture of it in the moment, sent it to my wife because it was so heavy. And I didn't know, and I sat there for 20 minutes soaking it up, and I just didn't know what to say. And I just said, thank you, Jimmy. And I walked out the door.
Damn.
I went to the kitchen and talked to the band about it. The drummer and the bass player were there, and it's like, as if there weren't any more heavy moments. It wouldn't get any better. He goes, the bass player said, I talked to the curator here at the museum, and there are only 2 people that played in that bedroom, Jimmy and you. And I crapped my pants. So it was great. What a great day. And then we wound up going to a club. We pushed it a little bit. We went to a club in Soho where they were having a blues jam, and those people smoke and they smoke in the bars there. And the cigarette smoke kind of bothers me a little bit. It's tough. We went to this smoky bar in Soho, the jam session. We played a couple of songs. They worked it out. The guy running the jam was a musician from Cleveland, an expat who lived in England. And he'd heard of me, and they set up, blocked out some time for me and the band. And we had a great jam session in Soho. And we had to get up the next morning and go to Abbey Road. And we recorded at Studio 3. There are 3 studios in Abbey Road. Number 1 is the biggest one. It's where they have the when they need strings or orchestras.
Sure.
In fact, Sir Paul was in Studio 1 at one of the days we were recording. And Studio 2 is the main studio where the Beatles recorded most of their classic hits.
Okay.
The biggest albums. But Studio 3, which was the smallest one, was as impactful because the Beatles recorded, it was the smallest studio, which suited us fine. As a 3-piece, it suited us fine. But that's where they recorded the White Album, Abbey Road,
Wow,
and Revolver. And Pink Floyd recorded Dark Side of the Moon.
Oh, yeah.
Wish You Were Here, and Pipers at the Gates of Dawn. So, and So it was pretty amazing. And it didn't, and when you see videos of the Beatles in that studio, you could say, "Oh, I know that part of the studio." It was mind blowing. And then they had a Shallon piano, one of the old Shallon, like a teacher's piano, like a school teacher's piano. One of the many that Paul used on. He used a bunch, and this one was used. It was used on. I would imagine he used it on "Hey Jude" and "Day in the Life" and "Lady Madonna." Those pianos were used on those White Album recordings. So our producer Dave Gross, he's a George Martin disciple. So he knew everything about what to use, what mics to use in the room,
Sure.
everything. But he also could play piano, and he hit that last E chord in "Day in the Life" on this Shallon piano that McCartney played on, and went boom, and just let it ring, just like the album. And I crapped my pants again. You get the
Man.
goosebumps. And I'm like, man, it don't get any better than this. And it was reflective of it was you could hear it in the album. Um, it's just an amazing room. They kept up, they still have the old boards that they used back in the 60s, but they updated the stuff that they use now. They got a beautiful Neve console, which is the best consoles in the world, which are the best consoles in the world. And the sound was amazing. And it helped to have a producer that was a George Martin disciple and is just a super freaky genius and knows where to put everything.
Sure.
And we did Your Blues from the White Album. We did it for kicks. The label's like, well, you should do a Beatles song. I said, well, all right, what should we do? And he said, Your Blues. I said, all right, we're going to try it. Let's try it. And I swear, other than my vocal, it sounds just like the Beatles version. Although I did pretty well on the vocal. That was a tough vocal to sing. John Lennon
I'll
was
bet.
singing his ass off on that song, and I was straining to the point where I couldn't finish the vocals. There was a bug. Somebody the drummer got sick. My drummer Ray got sick. He got a cold or something, and then he passed it on to me. So we got most of the tracks in, but a lot of the vocals I couldn't get. I couldn't get the vocals in. I ran out of my voice ran out 3 days into it. So we wound up doing the overdubs in Jersey, my producer's studio in his house. And that was the last vocal I did. And that thing was so hard to do, but it was so gratifying to be able to pull it off. And I can't wait for you to hear it. I'm very proud of that track. I'm proud of everything we did on that record, but to be able to do a Beatles song in the studio where the Beatles recorded.
Where the original was there. Yeah.
Yeah, where the original. Just
Man.
incredible experience.
Well, I have to tell you, I've had an opportunity to hear the album, which was a wonderful experience. I always do my best to try to pick a few favorite tracks when I do an episode like this.
Yeah.
And in no particular order.
Please do.
I'm Afraid to Fall Asleep.
Yeah.
Slumlord Billionaire.
Yeah.
Don't Burn Down the Bridge.
Yeah.
And Uncertainty. I think those are some of my favorites. How about you,
Mine
Albert?
too. Mine too. I love Uncertainty because
It's got a really cool hook, doesn't it?
yeah, and a friend of mine, I was in a rock band in the early 2000s. Yeah, it was a side project. It was a departure from my blues thing. But sometimes, the gigs would dry up, and I had this other project going, and it was all friends that we'd known for years. And my friend Scott Mayer wrote that song when I was in this rock band, and I know it was my favorite original song of his. And I envisioned doing this song at some point, and finally got a chance to recreate it. We never recorded it, so I played it on acoustic for the band, and they're like, "Oh, this has got some mule vibes to it," and some Southern rock vibes.
Yes, sir.
But there's
Yes, sir.
also some Beatle vibes in it too, because there's some background vocals that remind me of the Beatles on the bridge or the pre-chorus or the chorus. There's some very swirly Beatles kind of tones in it too. But it's a very Southern rock, government mule, almonds kind of vibes, and then that appealed to me. I love that one.
I agree. 100%.
Afraid to Fall Asleep. Love that record. That was a friend of mine who song many of his songs I've recorded over the years. His name Graham Drought. He's an amazing singer songwriter. Had a blues band for years in Miami called Iko Iko, and they were the house band at Tobacco Road, which was the oldest bar in Miami. And he was the king of the blues. And he was, to me, he's like as good a songwriter as Bob Dylan or John Hyatt. He just never got the break that they did. But he wrote this song. Well, he was sick. He had a lot of health problems in the last few years, and I think he was laid up in bed when he wrote that song. And it hit a personal note with me because 2 years ago, my appendix burst right after the blues bender in Vegas, and I
Oh, wow.
and I got sepsis, and I was laid up in bed at home for weeks, and I went back to work entirely too early. But boy, that was something. I almost died.
Yeah.
People don't understand how serious an appendix is. It doesn't do anything, but if it bursts, it could
You're
kill
in
you.
trouble. You're in trouble.
And if it had
Yeah.
happened in Vegas, I would have died because I would have said, "Oh, I'll be all right. I'm going to go play the slots in." But my fever came, and I found myself in bed, and that song resonated with me. And I said, "Man, if I survive this, as soon as I get the next album, I'm putting this song on the album." And that's a freaking great song.
Yes, sir.
Excruciatingly painful. I was lying in my bed, angels buzzing around my head. I just that's how I felt. I was delirious. I came out of the surgery and I felt like that song was just like in my head the whole time. I'm afraid to fall asleep. That's why I make that midnight, because he's not ready to die. He's not ready to
Right.
go. And he doesn't want God to take him quite yet. And so I had put that one in there. Slumlord Billionaire is just my it's just the band came up with the riff and I came up with the lyrics, and it's just about the greed of man and how money doesn't buy you class. That's all. People associate money with being classy, and come across entirely too many. I've met a lot of wealthy people that are just ultimate class acts, but they weren't class acts because of the money. They were just good people.
Yes, sir.
And when you put the money in wrong people's hands, you get greedy bastards, and you get people that don't treat people so nice. And
Right.
so that's what my song is. And who hasn't had an encounter with a slumlord? I've I've had a few
Yeah. My
living in
also.
Chicago. But that's what that song was about. And what was the other one? Oh, Don't Burn the Bridge.
Yeah.
Well, that's an Albert King song, and I always wanted to record it. And I envisioned getting Eric Gales on it because he's such a big Albert King disciple, but it didn't work out. And I'd love to get Eric Gales on a recording one day. He's the best electric guitar player out there. And but love that song. Used to play it in Chicago all the time. It was one of the standards you had to learn if you were going to play in Chicago and play in bands and put bands in Chicago. We just put a bunch of guys together. A club needed a band. We just put a band together and just play, and we just get away with playing standards all night and make a few bucks. That was the Chicago way,
Oh,
for
yeah.
lack of a better term, Mr. Toronzo Cannon's.
To quote
It was the
Toronzo, there you
Chicago
go.
way, was to put a band together at the last minute, go play at Roses or something, and spit out a bunch of standards And Don't Burn the Bridge was one of those songs you had to know. You know.
And
So
and
yeah,
irony of ironies. I did an interview with Toronzo and another gentleman back when they found Lefty Diz guitar,
oh
and
yeah.
and it ended up with Joe Bonamassa, who's having it totally reworked and ready to go on the road. And I can't wait to hear that thing sing.
Oh my God. I would
I
kill to play. I love
What
Lefty
a
Did.
cool story, man.
Yeah.
What a cool story. All right,
Yeah, man.
sir.
That's what
Where
life is.
can
Life. We do this for the. I don't do this for the money. I do
right?
it for the stories and the memories. And in that case, I'm the richest man in the world. In that case,
You have shared $1 million worth of memories with me today on this program for sure. Where can we send people to learn more about you and the Blood Brothers? Maybe to buy some CDs, vinyl, merch, or to book you guys for a gig.
um, go on my website, albertcastiglia.com
Hmm.
or .net, either or. And there's links to the Blood Brothers. There's links to the new album to pre-order. There's yeah, merch. I got T-shirts and all kinds of stuff. And yeah,
I'm
you
gonna
can
have to
follow.
order one so I can wear it on my show once in a while.
Very good. What's that? You were in Windy City Blues Society? Is
I
that what that
am,
is?
yeah. I ordered this during Blues Fest because they did not have a Chicago Blues Fest shirt available online. And I reached out to the guy because he's like, "Man, I've been buried. I just got it shipped off to you." And I told him about the shirt. He goes, "Well," he says, "we still got them. If you want one, let me know." So I'm going to reach out to him and order a Chicago Blues Fest shirt.
And
So
I wish I played it once. After Junior died, we did a big tribute to Junior.
yeah,
There's me and Lee Oscar, the whole Junior's band, and uh, Ronnie Baker Brooks, Wayne Baker Brooks. They all of and that was the last time I played it. I don't think I'll ever go back. I don't think I'm a little too edgy for them. They too contemporary. But I love
yeah,
that festival. I used to go there all the time when I lived there.
right on. Well, Albert Castiglia, it has been a pleasure having you today on Time Signatures. I want to thank you so much for sharing your stories with me today. And anytime you have a new album or a tour to promote, you have a microphone here, man. Anytime.
Well, anytime you want to talk, I got tons more stories.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna keep you on that, and I'll bring you back. I promise you that.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, as this episode comes to a close, please allow me to talk to you about the Just Blues Music Foundation. Just Blues is a foundation whose mission is to nurture the soul of the blues with the mission to protect and preserve blues heritage, honoring the originators of the blues and those who continue the legacy of the blues. Just Blues offers many cultural heritage special events, the annual Just Blues Music Awards and Conference, historical blues educational programs for our youth, and so much more. You can make your tax-deductible donation today by visiting justblues.org. That's just without the T, blues.org, and look for the donate button at the top center of the page. And as always, thank you so much for your consideration. And that wraps up this edition of Time Signatures. Once again, my thanks to Albert Castiglia, but also to you. For without you, none of this would be possible. Jim Ervin reminding you, keeping the blues alive is everyone's responsibility, but preserving the history of the blues, one story at a time, that's my mission. Until next time, so long, everybody.
You've been listening to Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan. Now, for more information about CABS, visit capitalareablues.org. The Time Signatures theme song, Michigan Roads, is used by permission and was written by Root Doctor, featuring Freddie Cunningham. You can find this episode and past episodes of Time Signatures at lccconnect.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, keep on keeping the blues alive.
Baby, I'm home.
Ooh, shuggy ducky.